You ever have one of those moments where someone says something so cruel, so direct, that it should break you, but instead, it wakes you up? For me, it was a Sunday afternoon, sitting at my parents' dinner table, when my father looked me in the eye and said, "You'll be nothing without us." The words hit like a punch to the chest, but instead of crumbling, I had this strange clarity, like I could finally see the whole game for what it was. And I knew right then that I was done playing, but I'm getting a huletma. Because the moment I walked out that door wasn't just about one comment or one dinner. It was about a lifetime of being quietly erased in my own family. This isn't a story about some dramatic blow-up. It's about the slow, almost invisible erosion of self-worth, until one day you wake up and realize the people who were supposed to love you most are the ones hold. I grew up in a house where love had strings attached. It wasn't loud or abusive. It was the kind of emotional neglect that hides behind smiles and polite conversation. On the outside, we looked like a perfectly normal suburban family. 2 kids, 2 parents, backyard BBQs, holiday photos. But inside, the silence was deaf. I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my brother, the sweet talker, the golden boy. I was always a little too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too opinionated. I was the scapegoat. The unspoken rule was, if something went wrong, it must have somehow been my fault. I learned to be, you know what's wild? You can go years not knowing there's a name for what you're going through. But once you hear it, once you learn about the scapegoat child in toxic family systems, it's like someone handed you a flashlight in the dark. You start seeing the pattern. It was in the way my dad would sigh, just slightly when I showed him a piece of artwork I was proud of. I remember one Christmas in particular. I must have been around 15. I'd spent weeks working after school at a frozen yogurt shop, squirreling away tips to buy real gifts for everyone. Not generic ones, the ones. When she opened it, I watched her face. There was this moment, half a second, where I thought I saw her soften, but then, that tight, polite smile. Oh. She placed it on the side table like it was an old magazine. 5 minutes later, my brother gave her a cheap drugstore box of chocolates. She practically threw a parade, hugged him, called him So Thought T. That's when I started learning something nobody ever says out loud. By the time I was in college, I was used to being invisible. I picked a major I loved, English literature, and was immediately met with eye rolls. Duet Boohee was quiet, kind, the type of person who actually listened. For the first time, I felt seen, not judged, not sized up, just seen, and my family hate. They never said it outright. Of course not. That wasn't their style. But the digs started immediate, "He's very quiet, don't you think?" I just don't think he gets us. Every dinner turned into a subtle interrogation. Every compliment to him was laced with sarcasm. They weren't just judging him. They were trying to plant seeds of doubt in me. Because if I built a life outside of them, if someone else loved me unconditionally, their version of love, transactional, conditional, would crumble. One night, after yet another family dinner where I left feeling like a stranger in my own skin, I remember sitting in my car in their driveway. My boyfriend was in the passenger seat, quiet. He turned to me and asked, "Do you even like how you feel when you're around them?" And I couldn't answer, because I didn't like how I felt. I felt small. I felt erased. I felt like I was constantly begging to be allowed to exist. Still, I kept going back, because that's the thing no one tells you about toxic families. The manipulation is so quiet, so baked into your reality that you think you're the problem. You think if you just try a little harder, be a little quieter, do everything right, then maybe this time they'll love you the way you need. But they won't, because they can't. And admitting that feels like a death. What finally woke me up wasn't some dramatic event. It was that gray, sleepy Sunday dinner I mentioned earlier. I was trying to share good news. I'd just been offered a job in another city, a real opportunity, a job I was passionate about. Not across the country, just 3 hours away. But you'd think I'd told them I was joining a cult in Alaska. My dad cut his roast beef into angry little squares while my mom stirred her tea like she was trying to crack the cup. "I just don't understand why you'd want to leave," she said. "You have everything here." I opened my mouth, closed it, then finally said, "I don't have everything here." That's when he dropped the line, the one that changed everything. "You'll be nothing without us." For a second, the room went still. I used to think that sentence would break me. Instead, it set me free. That dinner table suddenly felt like a courtroom, and I was the defendant, again. But this time, something shifted. It's funny how the scariest thing you fear for years can sound so pathetic once it's said out loud. "You'll be nothing without us." I'd spent my entire life with that phrase hanging in the air like smoke. Sometimes it was subtle. Other times it was right there, unspoken but sharp. But hearing it, finally spoken out loud, flat, unflinching and cruel, it didn't shatter me like I thought it would. It cleared the fog. He wasn't warning me. He was threatening me. Because my success, my independence, would unravel the story they'd written about me. If I became something without them, it meant they were wrong about who I was all along, and they couldn't handle that. I looked across the table and realized something that changed my life. They weren't afraid for me. They were afraid of me. Afraid of me growing, afraid of me leaving, afraid of me proving I didn't need their approval to be whole. I used to think I was weak, that I needed their love, no matter the cost. But I was wrong. All that time, I was just a strong person trained to think she was fragile, and I was done. I pushed my chair back. The sound cut through the room like thunder. My hands were shaking, but my voice? Calm, controlled, dangerous in the way that truth always is. "No," I said, "you're wrong." My mom blinked like she'd just heard a language she didn't recognize. My dad's jaw clenched. The room was frozen, like everyone was waiting for the old version of me to come crawling back with an apology. But I didn't. Not this time. "I'm not running away," I added. "I'm walking towards something. Something better. Something mine." My dad threw his napkin down. "Don't be so dramatic. We gave you everything. A good home, an education. This is the thanks we get?" That was always their go-to. Gratitude as a leash. And then came the last blow, meant to break me one final time. "You'll last 6 months," he said, voice low. "Then you'll come crawling back, and we'll have to pick up the pieces. Again." But I didn't argue, because I finally realized something important. You can't win a rigged game. The only winning move is to stop playing. I stood up, grabbed my coat and keys, and walked to the door. My mom's voice followed me like a ghost down the hallway. "Don't be ridiculous. Come back. Sit down." But I didn't. I opened the front door. Cold air hit my face like a baptism. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and sat in my car for a long moment, gripping the wheel like it might anchor me in this new world. That silence? That was the sound of a world ending and a new one beginning. I didn't know what waited for me outside of that house, but for the first time in my life, I knew I was choosing myself. Not because I hated them, but because I was finally done hating me. Let me tell you something no one talks about when you leave a toxic family. The guilt will try to kill you. It doesn't come slow. It crashes in, like a wave that knocks the air out of your lungs. The voicemails started that night. Tearful messages from my mom. "Sweetheart, please call me. We're worried. You're making a huge mistake." Then the angry text from my sibling. "How could you do this to Mom and Dad? You're tearing the family apart." It was textbook psychological manipulation, a last-ditch effort to get me back in line. Psychologists call this an extinction burst. When a toxic system loses its grip on the scapegoat, it lashes out harder. Just like a rat who used to get food from pressing a lever. When the food stops coming, it doesn't stop pressing. It smashes the lever harder, faster, more desperately. I was the rat. My family was the machine. And I'd finally stopped playing my part. But the withdrawal? It was brutal. Their voices weren't just on my phone. They were in my head. You're being cruel. You're ungrateful. You are nothing without them. Every message they sent was like salt in an invisible wound. I second-guessed myself constantly. I even opened my blocked contacts list once, hovering over the unblock button. But I didn't, because in that moment, I remembered something. They didn't miss me. They missed the role I played. They missed the daughter who absorbed their dysfunction, who smiled through the pain, who never asked for more than scraps of affection. The minute I started asking for respect, they didn't know what to do with me. That's when I went fully no contact, blocked numbers, deleted voicemails, clean break, not out of hatred, out of necessity. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. I needed silence long enough to hear my voice over theirs. In those first few weeks, I felt like I was floating in space, untethered, terrified, and so alone. So I did what any millennial would do. I Googled. I found Reddit forums, online communities, articles with titles like, "What happens when you go no contact with toxic parents?" I started reading stories, dozens of them, of people just like me. There was one post I'll never forget. A woman wrote, "I used to think I was broken. Then I realized I was just raised by people who needed me to believe that." I read that sentence 5 times, saved it, wrote it down. And that's when I found the term scapegoat child. It was like reading my own diary. Every tactic, every feeling, every internal war. It was all there. And suddenly, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was the byproduct of a system that needed me to feel that way to function. Learning the language of toxicity was like putting on armor. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it shape. It gave it a name. And when pain has a name, you can fight it. People think the hardest part is walking away. It's not. The hardest part is staying away. After the adrenaline fades, after the silence settles in, there's a different kind of storm. It's not chaos. It's grief. But not grief for the family I left behind. It was grief for the family I never had to begin with. I used to fantasize about a mom I could call when life was falling apart. A dad who'd be proud of me for trying, even if I failed. I wanted to be the kind of daughter who could show up to Sunday dinner and be met with warmth instead of scrutiny. But that version of my family never existed. Not really. And letting go of that dream, it was brutal. I remember standing in the grocery store one October, walking past a Thanksgiving display. There were smiling families on every sign, pumpkin pies stacked high, paper plates that read, "Grateful, thankful, blessed." And I just broke. Right there in aisle 5. I left a full cart behind and walked out. I sat in my car trying to breathe and realized I wasn't sad about missing them. I was mourning what never was. And that grief, it's real. My therapist, who honestly deserves hazard pay, told me something that changed everything. She said, "You're not grieving people. You're grieving hope. Hope that they'd change. Hope that one day they'd say, 'We're proud of you.' Hope that eventually I'd do something right enough to earn their love." That hope had been my coping mechanism for years. Letting it go felt like pulling the plug on the life support of my inner child. So I let myself grieve. I cried during commercials. I cried walking my dog. I cried when I saw happy families in coffee shops. It felt stupid, but it was necessary. And in the middle of that grief, I did something kind of weird, but powerful. I started writing letters I would never send. Pages and pages. Sometimes to my mom, sometimes to my dad. Sometimes to the teenage version of me who was still waiting for someone to say, "You matter." I wrote all the things I was never allowed to say. "You hurt me." I tried so hard. I wanted to be enough for you. Then I'd rip them up. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about release. Because here's the truth. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself. That first Thanksgiving was weird. I didn't go home. I didn't call. I turned off my phone and stayed in my tiny apartment thinking I'd just ride it out alone. But around noon, a friend texted, "I'm skipping the family chaos. Want to come over? I've got wine and a frozen turkey that may or may not be edible." We burned the pie. The turkey was dry. We sat on the floor eating stuffing out of Tupperware. It was one of the best Thanksgivings of my life. No judgment, no eggshells, just people being exactly who they were. That's when I started leaning into a concept I'd only ever heard in passing. Chosen family. Not the people you're born to, the ones you build, brick by brick, moment by moment, through trust, laughter, and a shared understanding that you're safe just being you. I started saying yes more. Yes to coffee invites. Yes to weekend hikes. Yes to random dinner parties with people who didn't know my past and didn't care. They just liked me. At first, it felt strange, like I was cheating on my real family. But over time, I started to understand. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to your soul, and loyalty without reciprocity isn't love, it's bondage. Rewiring my inner voice. You know what's wild? Even after I went no contact, even after I found peace and built a life that was finally mine, the loudest voice tearing me down was still theirs. I'd be applying for a job, and in my head I'd hear, "You'll never be good enough." I'd set a boundary in a relationship and I'd hear, "You're too emotional, you're too much." It was like they'd moved out of my life, but left behind a voice recording that played on loop in my mind. That's the thing about psychological abuse. It doesn't stop at the door. It follows you. So I had to start rewiring my brain, not overnight, not with mantras and mood boards, with small, deliberate acts of rebellion. The first thing I did, I bought a bright abstract painting for my living room, something wild and chaotic and beautiful. It was the kind of art my parents would have hated. Every time I walked past it, I smiled, because it was mine, my taste, my space. Then I started making decisions without calling 5 people to ask if I was doing it right. I learned to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty and trust that I'd figure it out. One day, after making a big financial move I was proud of, I had a full-on panic attack. Not because it was the wrong decision, but because I didn't have anyone's disapproval to react to. I realized I'd been living my whole life in response to someone else's voice. Now I was trying to learn my own. And let me tell you, it's quiet at first. But the more I listened, the louder it grew. You might be wondering, how do you really know you're healing? Here's how I knew. One day, I looked in the mirror, not to fix anything, not to judge, just to see. And I met my own eyes and thought, you're doing okay. Not perfect, not finished, but okay. For someone raised to believe that her worth depended on someone else's approval, that moment was revolutionary. You don't heal by being perfect. You heal by showing up for yourself over and over until the voice in your head finally sounds like you. Let me be real with you. Healing isn't some pretty sunrise where everything suddenly feels better. It's more like fixing a leaky sink during a thunderstorm, with duct tape and a butter knife. Every day after I walked away from my family felt like a test I hadn't studied for. I didn't know how to trust people. I didn't know how to trust myself. And honestly, I didn't know who I was without their voices in my head. Because when your entire identity is built around surviving someone else's expectations, what's left when those expectations are gone? At first, I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work. I said yes to everything: projects, coffee dates, late-night brainstorms, anything to avoid being alone with the emptiness. But eventually, the silence catches up. One night, I was standing in my kitchen eating leftover pad thai straight from the box, and I suddenly thought, I don't even know what I like. Not just food, I mean anything. What kind of music do I like when no one's watching? What kind of clothes make me feel good, not just what's appropriate? What do I actually want my life to look like? It sounds small, But that was my next mountain. Learning to make choices for myself, by myself, without asking permission. I'll never forget the first thing I bought for my new apartment. It was this wild, abstract canvas, swirls of orange and teal, totally chaotic. It was loud, the kind of thing my mom would have scoffed at and called tacky. But I loved it. It made the room feel alive. More importantly, it made me feel alive. From there, I gave myself permission to explore. I got a tattoo, just a small one, a little quote that reminded me who I was trying to become. I dyed my hair a shade warmer, wore combat boots with dresses, ordered weird drinks at bars, and slowly, those tiny choices started stacking up into something bigger: identity. I wasn't building a new version of myself from scratch. I was peeling away all the layers they'd buried me under. For the first time, I was becoming someone I recognized in the mirror. Here's something no one prepares you for. When you stop living your life for someone else, you lose the backup plan you never realized you were counting on. I didn't have anyone to fix it if I messed up, and that's terrifying. But it's also liberating. Take this one example. I was offered a chance to lead a project at work, a big one. Budget authority, team management, full responsibility. The kind of role that could either launch my career or crash it. Old me would have spent 3 days spiraling. What if I fail? What if I mess up and everyone sees? New me still spiraled. But I said yes anyway. And here's the twist. I did mess up. I forgot to submit a report on time, missed a call with a vendor. I felt the panic flood in, that old voice whispering, "See? They were right. You're not cut out for this." But no one yelled. No one shamed me. My boss just said, "Let's figure it out." And we did. That was the moment I realized. Failure doesn't mean I'm broken. It means I'm learning. That idea was foreign to me. I'd been raised to believe that mistakes made you unworthy, that messing up was the end of the world. Turns out, it's not. Turns out I'm not fragile. I'm resilient. And the more I tested that theory, the more I started to believe it. You know what word haunted me the most growing up? Enough. I was never good enough, never quiet enough, never obedient, polite, grateful enough. That word was used like a leash, always keeping me just short of rest. So I decided to reclaim it. I wrote it on sticky notes and left them around the house. I whispered it to myself after hard days. I used it like a mantra in moments of doubt. I am enough. Not once I hit a milestone. Not after I fix myself. Just as I am. Do you know how radical that is? To look at your imperfect, messy, trying your best self and think, you're doing okay. You're enough today. That's the kind of healing they don't write books about, but it's the most important kind. Growing up, my worth was transactional. If I achieved, I had value. If I failed, I didn't. If I made them proud, I was lovable. If I disappointed them, I was disposable. That's a dangerous equation to carry into adulthood, because when no one's there to hand out gold stars anymore, you feel worthless by default. So I had to build a new system. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast, but it worked. I started keeping promises to myself, tiny ones. If I say I'm going to do the dishes, I do the dishes. If I say I'm going to take a walk, I take the damn walk, even if it's just to the mailbox. Each time it was like laying one more brick in a house called self-trust. Because when you've spent a lifetime being gaslit, you stop trusting your own instincts. Rebuilding that takes time and repetition. But with every small win, I started to believe I can trust myself. I can rely on myself. I'm capable. I'm safe with me. Let me share a story that really drove it home. A few months after going no contact, I got food poisoning. Real bad. Couldn't stand up. Couldn't drive. I lay there on my bathroom floor, half conscious, and thought, this is it. I'm going to die alone because I cut off my family. But then I did something I never would have done before. I called a friend. She came over in 20 minutes, brought Gatorade, took care of me like it was no big deal. And you know what she said? You'd do the same for me. And she was right. I would. That moment rewired something in me. It proved that being cared for doesn't have to come with a cost, that I can need people and still be independent. That love, real love, is reciprocal. When you're raised in dysfunction, healing looks like rebellion. It looks like making weird art, saying no without explaining yourself, buying your favorite snacks even when no one else likes them, trusting your gut even when it shakes. The point isn't to become perfect. The point is to become you, fully, unapologetically, lovingly, because you've always been enough. They just couldn't see it. But now you do. If you had asked me a few years ago what I wanted most from my family, I would have said one word: validation. That pat on the back. The simple, "We're proud of you." The kind of acknowledgement you see in movies where the dad finally says, "You turned out okay, kid." I chased that moment for years, through report cards, promotions, holidays, and phone calls where I disguised desperation as casual updates. And then, something wild happened. I stopped needing it. Not all at once. Not like a light switch. It happened slowly, in layers, like the way winter turns to spring. At first, you don't even notice. And then one day, you walk outside, and it's warm. You can breathe again. That's what self-worth feels like when it finally starts to root. And the craziest part? The day I realized I no longer craved their approval, I grieved it. Because that part of me, the one who kept knocking on a locked door, had kept me company for so long. Letting go of her felt like another goodbye, but it was a necessary one. One of the last chains that kept me tied to them was the fantasy. You know the one I mean. That secret daydream you carry around in your back pocket, the one where they change, where your mom calls you crying and says, "I'm sorry, I didn't know how to love you the way you needed," where your dad shows up at your door, awkward and quiet, but trying, where you sit around a table, finally being seen, not as the difficult one or the disappointment, but as you. That fantasy is powerful, and also dangerous, because as long as you keep holding out for it, you're not living in reality. You're pausing your healing. You're still centering your life around people who made you feel small. Letting go of the fantasy wasn't easy. It came in pieces. It was the day I had a big win at work and didn't feel the urge to text them. It was walking past a card aisle on Father's Day and not reaching for something out of guilt. It was learning how to celebrate myself without needing their applause. I didn't stop loving the idea of what they could have been, but I finally stopped letting that idea control me. After I went no contact, I expected my life to feel hollow. That's what they always warned me about, right? You'll be alone. No one else will ever love you like we do. You'll come crawling back. But the truth? My life got quieter, yes, but quieter doesn't mean empty. Quieter means peaceful mornings with coffee I brewed just the way I like it. It means choosing who I let into my space, emotionally, mentally, physically. It means knowing that a holiday can be joyful, even without a full table. There's a kind of deep joy in a life that isn't performative, when no one's grading your choices, when you're not bracing for criticism every time you speak. I used to think freedom would feel like fireworks. Turns out it feels like safety. One of the most surprising parts of this journey? How much better my relationships got once I healed the part of me that accepted crumbs. I started showing up differently in friendships. I stopped chasing people who were lukewarm. I stopped trying to earn love. I stopped over-explaining myself. And you know what happened? The right people stayed. The wrong ones quietly drifted. I made space for people who loved me not despite my honesty, but because of it. People who could say, "That hurt me," without weaponizing it. People who could hear, "I need space," and respect it. And slowly, I started to understand what healthy love looks like. It doesn't rush. It doesn't punish. It doesn't keep score. Healthy love lets you breathe. You know how, when you move to a new place, it takes a while for it to feel like home? That's how it felt inside my own head. After years of living with a running commentary from my parents in my mind, my inner world was kind of like an apartment after a bad breakup. Echoey, confused, still holding on to old furniture that didn't fit anymore. But now the voice in my head is gentler. It's not perfect. I still get the occasional whisper of doubt, but more often than not, I hear things like, "That was brave. You're doing the best you can. You're allowed to rest. You didn't overreact. You were hurt." And that's valid. And when I mess up, it doesn't spiral into self-loathing. I acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on, because I'm no longer trying to earn love through perfection. I'm just trying to live. A few months ago, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, a distant cousin. They'd heard through the grapevine about me cutting off my parents. They were curious. They weren't rude, just confused. "Do you ever regret it?" they asked. I paused, and for a moment, I scanned my entire life. Every scar, every lonely night, every birthday that passed without a call, every moment I chose myself over a false peace. And then I wrote back, "No, not once. I regret not doing it sooner." Because sometimes the only way to survive a fire is to stop trying to put it out and just walk away. Here's what I know now, with every fiber of my being. You don't have to be broken to be lovable. You don't have to be useful to deserve peace. You don't have to stay small to keep the people around you comfortable. Walking away from your family or anyone who refuses to love you without conditions isn't giving up. It's coming home, to yourself. It's not easy. It's not quick. But it's the most honest, soul-deep kind of freedom you'll ever know. And if you're in the middle of that decision, standing at the door, wondering if it's too late, too hard, too selfish, I want you to hear me. It's not. You're allowed to choose you, even if no one else ever has. Let me tell you something they don't advertise about healing. It's not always triumphant. Sometimes it's just quiet. There was no grand finale to my story, no big reunion, no dramatic apology, no moment where the people who hurt me saw the light and begged me to come back. And honestly, that used to break my heart. But now, it brings me peace. Because here's the truth, the closure I thought I needed from them. Some perfect lines, some weepy, "We were wrong." It never came, and it never had to. Because I found something better than closure. I found peace. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'm sitting on my couch with a mug of tea, sunlight pouring through my windows. My phone is silent, not buzzing with passive-aggressive texts or emotional landmines disguised as checking in. There's no tension in my chest, no mental rehearsal of what I'll say to avoid starting another argument, just calm. That's the real victory. Not a big career, not some success story I can wave in front of them like a trophy, not a look what you missed out on moment. It's this. It's peace in the ordinary. It's grocery shopping without shame, laughing with friends without overthinking, making a mistake and not hearing their voices echo in my head. It's the quiet confidence of knowing who I am, even if they never do. They told me I'd be nothing without them. What they really meant was, I'd be nothing to them if I stopped playing the role they assigned me. But the minute I stopped trying to be their version of me, I started discovering the real version. The version that laughs too loud, that loves hard, that cries during commercials and dances in the kitchen and stands up for herself, even when her voice shakes. That version was there all along. She was just buried beneath years of criticism and conditional love. Walking away wasn't about burning bridges. It was about refusing to live under someone else's ceiling. If I could sit across from the younger version of me, the girl who tried so hard to be good enough, I'd take her hands and say, "You're not difficult. You were just surrounded by people who refuse to understand you. You're not broken. You were reacting to pain that no one else acknowledged. You're not a failure. You were set up to lose a game that was never fair." And then I'd whisper what I didn't believe back then, but now know is true. You are not too much. You were never too much. You are exactly enough. If you're still stuck in the spiral, still chasing the approval, still shrinking yourself to be accepted, still walking on eggshells hoping this time will be different, I see you, and I need you to know it's not your job to earn basic decency. You don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. You don't owe anyone your loyalty if they use that loyalty to hurt you. You are not selfish for choosing peace. Healing isn't a destination. It's a lifelong relationship with yourself. There are still days when I feel the ache. Holidays are still weird. Family stories still catch me off guard. I still sometimes feel the sting of what could have been. But the difference now? I don't let those moments define me. They're just chapters, not the whole book. And the story I'm writing now, it's messy, it's quiet, it's filled with joy I don't have to justify. And best of all, it's mine. You can outgrow your pain. You can outlive the story they wrote for you. You can choose to walk away without apology and build something better from scratch. They said I'd be nothing without them. They were wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was just buried beneath them. And now that I've walked away, I'm not just surviving, I'm free. If this story felt like a mirror for you, do me a favor, hit that like button. Drop a comment below with the words, "I choose peace," and share one lesson you've learned from your own healing journey. And if you've followed this far, consider subscribing. This channel isn't just about storytelling, it's about reclaiming our narratives together. Your story matters. Your peace matters. You matter. Thanks for walking this road with me.